Carriers include Progressive. Progressive Commercial Insurance protects small businesses from retailers to tradespeople. Progressive covers a variety of business needs with a range of coverages. More at progressivecommercial.com.
Welcome on in to Studio 2 here at WHYY. I'm Avi Wolfman-Arndt.
Hello, I'm Cherry Gregg. Today, we are talking about SEPTA. SEPTA is again sounding the alarm. A $213 million structural deficit looms, and without a major cash infusion, drastic cuts are planned, including eliminating 55 bus routes, shutting down 5 regional rail lines, a 9 p.m. system-wide curfew, and a fare hike. And it might feel like Groundhog Day because this isn't the first time we've been here.
It is not.
No, just last year, Governor Josh Shapiro swooped in to keep SEPTA from falling off this financial cliff by diverting $153 million from PennDOT highway funds to help bail out the agency. But that move only bought time. It didn't solve the underlying problem. Okay. And so today we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about SEPTA. We have Interim General Manager Scott Sauer here with us all hour. He's going to be taking your questions.
Sauer all hour. That was pretty good.
I didn't even realize that was going to come out like that. But we're going to have We're going to have Interim General Manager of SEPTA here all hour, Scott Sauer. And
technically he's not here all hour. He's here for
45
minutes. Yeah.
45, 50 minutes. But we want to get your questions about SEPTA. Also, I'd love to hear your solutions for this funding crisis that keeps popping up. And the number is 888-477-9499. You can email studio2@whyy.org. And if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to leave your questions or comments in the chat. We have very smart listeners.
Yes.
And I want to hear what people think we should do because this keeps happening. It's like we keep having this conversation.
No bad ideas and brainstorming.
And we need to find a solution for SEPTA.
Absolutely. Absolutely. By the way, quick update on a story that we talked about yesterday. We mentioned the street olives on the corner in South Philadelphia, and I wanted to tell folks they are still there.
Oh, goodness.
I checked this morning. They've moved 1 block, but they're still there.
Has the smell started to take over the block?
I still didn't sniff them.
Okay.
Have not gone that far.
Lock the nostrils.
Don't
do it.
Your Brine Witness News update from Avi Wolfman-Arndt. And let's do a trio of local news stories now, Cherry.
All right. Since we've been talking about transportation, we're going to start with transportation and move over to the airport. So apparently international travel through Philadelphia International is down significantly.
Significantly?
Yes. Non-citizen visitors dropped by over 10% since January. That's according to data from the U.S. Customs and Border Protection. The big reason, according to the local tourism officials, is related to anti-American sentiment overseas, international reactions to the trade wars, and this ongoing global fallout over the America First rhetoric. All of this, of course, is based on anecdotal evidence. But international visitors generated over $1 billion in economic impact for Philadelphia last year. But I will mention that Philly is not alone because foreign visits to the U.S. is down 12% in March compared to March of last year.
And shout out to the Inquirer for this reporting, for collating all of this data. And I think the really important context point here, Cherry, is not just that international travel is down significantly year over year. Mm-hmm. It's that prior to November, there was no sign that this was coming.
Yep.
Travel was up year over year, consistently month to month. So that would suggest it is a direct reaction to the change in administration in Washington, unless you have some other theory about why it would have changed so suddenly and so dramatically. But obviously there is an economic impact here. We'll see how long this lasts.
Yeah.
Sometimes these things happen and then they sort of self-correct. There's an elasticity to things like this. But as of right now, there does seem to be a substantial change in travel to PHL from international tourists.
And I wanted to point out that the number of Canadians returning from trips to the U.S. fell about 32% during the month of March. That's, we had a whole show about Canada and the relationship between the United States and Pennsylvania and Canada. And, Canadians are not happy with us right now. So we'll see. We'll be watching this.
Another story that
Yes.
is a sort of a local refraction of what's happening in Washington. You might have heard about this. A couple of Rutgers professors, including a professor at Rutgers Campton, had this idea to create a version of NATO for higher ed institutions, a mutual defense agreement. And so they drafted up a resolution. It was passed by the Rutgers Faculty Senate. And since then, several other universities in the Big Ten, which is the athletic conference that Rutgers is part of, have signed on to this agreement. Again, it's a mutual defense agreement for higher ed institutions. What that actually means is a little unclear, but basically what it says is that an attack on one is an attack on all. And these professors were seeing attacks on higher ed institutions from the Trump administration and saying, if that happens to anyone who signs this, the professors at the other university will step in and lend some type of support. Again, it's just the professors. It's not the institutions themselves. So it's a little unclear what they could do. They can provide advice and counsel and maybe some human resources if one of these, if funding is threatened at one university or the other. But I think as a statement of values and a statement of where this is all headed, it is interesting to see universities maybe try to band together a little bit.
Yeah, and I'll say it's a signal that resistance is being talked about, that support could be there if the universities actually, the administrators actually took the further step. I'll say that 150 presidents of U.S. colleges, they wrote a statement on April 22nd. They signed a joint letter denouncing the Trump administration's unprecedented government overreach, but they haven't teamed up in this way.
Right.
So maybe they're providing an example to those presidents who's taking some step.
Right.
But it's not this NATO style. We're going to work together. We're going to put money behind it. We're going to do anything about it.
Right. So it's sort of pre-NATO. It's proto-NATO,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But I think what's interesting about it is the shift in perspective, because in our system here in this country, universities are very explicitly competitors.
Yeah, they're competitors.
You know, yes, they're nonprofits for the most part, but they are, let's be honest, competitive businesses, really.
They need that tuition money.
Right. And
They
so it is not in their nature to cooperate or to provide defense for one another. And so I think it's that change in approach and perspective and mindset that might be notable. Maybe not so much this particular resolution, although you never know. But I do think, right, it's about this idea that perhaps we have to work together to survive.
Strength in numbers.
Strength in numbers.
All right. And we have one more.
Yes. And another transportation story, which is perfect for this SEPTA show.
I know.
So we like the story in Axios about Philadelphia getting 3 new roundabouts. So you know what a roundabout is, right?
Break it down for people.
Oh, you don't know what a roundabout
I thought I knew, and
Yeah.
then I think I was talking about something else.
So
A traffic
roundabouts
circle,
are all the rage right now, apparently. So a roundabout is sort of like a traffic circle, but a modern roundabout. What makes it different is that it's really not about beautification. It's not about putting a big fancy park in the middle. It's about controlling traffic flow and reducing traffic fatalities. And they've picked up steam in recent years, this idea that you should install more roundabouts at intersections instead of just having traffic lights. So it's like a traffic circle. You know, you enter when you can into the circle, blah, blah, blah. You go around. But it's designed a little bit differently, more with traffic calming at the center of the thought. And it's not just Philadelphia. The suburbs are adding 29 new roundabouts, which will be more than double their total of roundabouts in the burbs. So this idea of fewer intersections, more roundabouts. I was intrigued by this idea. I did not know much about it.
Yeah,
Are roundabouts the future, Cherry?
It might be. I live in East Kensington, so there is a roundabout that I didn't even know. I was like, oh, that's what this thing is.
Yeah.
It
So
is
that's
a roundabout.
one of the new roundabouts.
It is, but I will say it's still a little nerve-wracking as a pedestrian walking through the roundabout, because people still have that zombie look and they're just driving, not really paying attention.
It's a zombie look.
So hopefully, but at least they can't drive as fast just because the curve.
That's the idea.
So you're still safe.
Very tight curves. So even if you hit someone, right, it's going to be a fender bender instead of a fatal collision. And the other thing that I think roundabouts suffer from bad PR, because what we're used to in this country are traffic circles, which really is a different thing.
And those
those can be kind of hectic and scary.
like Aiken's Oval. Like,
Exactly. A sort of traffic designed roundabout does a very different thing. And look, we know traffic fatalities are higher in this country. Europe has embraced roundabouts. They have fewer traffic fatalities per capita. So perhaps this is a way forward, or at least some low-hanging fruit, because there's other things that contribute to the traffic fatalities that I would imagine are a little harder to control, like telling people buy slower, smaller cars, But a
That's
roundabout,
not going to happen.
yeah, well, it's going to be a harder lift, a bigger lift. Speaking of
This
transportation,
is a transportation show today.
we are all about getting from here to there today. And coming up, we're going to talk with Scott Sauer, interim GM of SEPTA. Your questions for him, get them in.
And we also want to hear your solutions
Yes.
for this SEPTA funding crisis. The number is 888-477-9499. The email is studio2@whyy.org. We'll be right back.
It means a lot to me, but I want to know why all these people getting on free. I mean, they get on the bus, not even saying, can I, or I don't have no money. Because if I'm paying my money, why can't they could pay their money.
Please do not cut the Paoli Thorndale. It's me and many others that catch it when I go to work. It's a lot that it's going to affect.
Take it every day. Take it from school home. I think right now it's like pretty great.
And welcome back, listeners and riders, to Studio 2. I'm Avi Wolfman-Arent.
And I'm Cherry Gregg. You just heard from SEPTA riders Kim, Pat, and June, who were along the Market Street East Corridor in Center City. They spoke with our producer, Andreas, yesterday. The transit agency is calling on Harrisburg for help. It needs lawmakers to step in for the public system that is facing a $213 million funding deficit.
SEPTA says drastic cuts to service are coming soon without new revenue. 50 bus routes and 5 regional rail lines eliminated. Fare hikes of 20% and 9 p.m. curfews on some lines. Is there a way out for SEPTA? If not, what would those cuts do to our region? With us now is SEPTA Interim General Manager Scott Sauer. Scott, welcome to Studio 2.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, and for our listeners at home, the question of the day is this: what questions do you have about SEPTA? We'd also like to hear possible solutions for this funding crisis. You can give us a call, 888-477-9499. You can email studio2@whyy.org. And for our Studio Tubers watching online, drop your comments in the YouTube live chat.
So, Scott, you might know SEPTA better than anyone's ever known SEPTA. You started as a trolley operator, right, in the early 90s. Do I have that right?
1990 to be specific.
1990
Wow.
to be specific. And now you're the interim general manager. Given that background, I want you to explain for people what is at stake in the next few months.
Yeah, so SEPTA is quite literally the backbone of the economy in this region, and in the Commonwealth for that matter. Transit is really the spine that gets things done. So for SEPTA, for our customers, and even for people who have never ridden a bus or a train, the absence of public transit in this region would be catastrophic. it means 800,000 people who ride SEPTA every day would suddenly either be without or have to crowd in to much less frequent service. For those who can't squeeze in, they're back on the roads, which means that the people who are already on the highways are going to see an effect by this, as will local roads and bridges and all the things that go into supporting all that automobile traffic.
So SEPTA sent out this doomsday plan that we have to execute if this budget hole does not get filled. Walk us through that plan, and then also provide some of the logic for why these decisions have been proposed.
Sure. So the budget we proposed just about 3 weeks ago is set to start pending board approval on July 1 of this year. And if I could backtrack just a second, we're in the current year, fiscal 25, and I know you mentioned the governor came in late the end of 24 and flexed highway dollars to close the budget hole that we were experiencing this year. The reason why that happened, or why it needed to happen, is when we budgeted for this year, we budgeted on the idea that the legislature would fix the budget crisis. It didn't happen.
Okay.
So we went into the second part of this fiscal year with this huge hole. What the July 1 budget now does is it budgets just based on the dollars that we currently have available.
It assumes no extra help.
No extra help. So now we are budgeting for a $213 million deficit. And so now so our board charged us with producing a budget that was reflective of that, get us to a balanced budget. We're required to produce a balanced budget each year.
And what does that mean?
That means that at the end of the year, all of our revenues and expenses essentially equal the same. So in order to get to that place, we have to produce a budget that accounts for that $213 million deficit. So we have to reduce our expenses by $213 million to get to that balanced budget. The only way to do that was to cut service deep. We are very much based on fixed costs. So, for example, if I stop running a train on a particular line, I still have to maintain the track and the stations and all the things that go with that, even if I don't run a single train on that line. So in order
that reduces your flexibility in terms of cutting costs, is what you're saying.
Without a doubt. So if we stop running service, the only thing we're really saving are labor costs. And when we produced a budget last year that looked at 20% cuts, we realized that that's only going to net us a savings of about $50 million.
Wow.
So we had to cut deep. And so we produced a budget that in two parts will result in 50 fewer bus routes, 5 fewer regional rail lines, a 9 p.m. curfew for rail, and 20% across the board cuts on everything else.
Speaking of the cuts, and I want to make sure I have this correct because I was reading through the budget, and that the 5 regional rail lines that would be potentially eliminated here operate over Amtrak territory. So why is that relevant in this conversation? So these lines were selected because of some sort of overlap with Amtrak, or what's the rationale there?
Yeah, so these 5 routes, they operate over Amtrak-controlled territory. So Amtrak is our landlord. So we pay rent. We pay rent to Amtrak to lease that trackage. So all of our trains that run over there, we have to pay Amtrak for the maintenance costs associated with the track, propulsion power, the privilege of running on their territory. By removing all these routes from service, that's a net savings of $65 million that comes right back to SEPTA dollar for dollar.
So basically, you save more and you save more efficiently if you cut those particular routes, which means it's not necessarily about ridership on those lines. It's more about how much you can save by cutting these routes because of the way financially they're arranged.
Correct. If you remember what I said about the maintenance costs, we don't maintain Amtrak's territory. Amtrak maintains that territory. So all we're obligated to do is remove our service. Got it. Whereas if we remove service on SEPTA territory, we're still responsible for that.
I want to quickly, in that sort of line, I want to shift to the buses, because bus ridership has improved, and in some, on some routes, they're better than it was pre-COVID. Why 50 route cuts?
It's really just a numbers game. We're trying to get to a balanced budget, and again, removing the service from, like I mentioned, the 20% cut only netted us about a $50 million savings. And the reason why that is there's elasticity of ridership. When you start cutting and reducing service, riders will leave.
Yep.
So that's less revenue. So when you take the total costs of the savings of stopping service or reducing service, it's offset by the loss in revenue. We're not going to collect any more fares. So the bus service has recovered post-pandemic faster than every other service we run.
Yeah, like it's 80%
Yeah.
of pre-pandemic total,
Yes.
right? And I think metro ridership around 67, regional rail around 72. So it's significantly ahead of the others.
Significantly, and you mentioned some bus routes are even surpassed
Yes. Yep.
pre-pandemic levels. We don't want to do any of this. I just want to make that point very clear. We don't want to cut anything. We don't want to reduce anything. So it's very important that while we talk about this, because this is what people have to react to, the bottom line is with a legislative fix, none of this has to happen.
Right.
None of it.
So let's talk about the other possible, there's more complicated solutions here, but the other thing that you can do with your budget is bring in more money. And you're talking about increasing that base fare from $250 to $290, right?
Yes.
I guess the question might be, why stop there? I understand that's a lot of pain for a lot of people, but we've also gone through an inflationary period. Lots of other things have gone up in cost. People do, in real dollars, have sort of more money in their pockets than they did 5-10 years ago. Could you be more aggressive there?
I mean, certainly there are limits,
Yeah.
because as we raise fares, that also chases away riders.
Sure.
There's a cost benefit analysis that we all do that determines how we do things.
Yeah.
So how I commute to wherever I'm going to commute to, the benefit of public transit versus automobile ownership versus rideshare. There's a magic number in there somewhere. And the 290, while it may not seem very aggressive to go from 250 to 290. On November 30th of 2024, that base fare was $2.
Yeah.
So it'll be almost a 50% increase.
Yeah, in a very short period of time. And you say that magic number because at a certain point, it doesn't make sense if you're catching the bus, twice a day, that if you add it up
That's
over
right.
time, you could just buy a car and it'd be cheaper to drive. I want to bring in a caller and see what you think about this. We have Bernie from Kensington on the line. Bernie, you're on Studio 2. What's your question or comment?
Hey, PA legislators have said that the Commonwealth will be more willing to give money to SEPTA if it operates more efficiently. Every time I ride SEPTA, I see inefficiencies and poor management. It looks like a social welfare organization to me with no accountability. SEPTA's head of video surveillance was recently convicted of millions of dollars of fraud and corruption, and I'm sure state legislators noticed that. I wish SEPTA's leadership would get its act together and run the agency more efficiently.
Let me ask a quick Bernie follow-up there. When you say you see it when you ride, what do you see? Give me an example.
I see workers in the ticket booth or whatever you call it, just sitting there looking at their cell phones. I see other people, SEPTA workers, kind of standing around. Back in the Depression times, they called folks like that shovel leaners. And I just see it just seems like a lot of lethargy and just not, maybe there's just low morale, which is maybe understandable, but it just seems like it's just people aren't really working hard, in my impression. I see all kinds of misconduct on the L cars, and the
Thank you, Bernie.
doesn't do anything about it.
Yeah. Thank you, Bernie. That's Bernie from Kensington. And by the way, I want to invite you to call in as well, 888-477-9499. You can email studio2@whyy.org. Scott, want to give you a chance to respond to Bernie. I mean, do you think that there are some inefficiencies in SEPTA and that there's more that the agency could be doing to just make money or to reduce the spend?
Yeah, listen, there's definitely opportunity here for us to help ourselves, and we have been doing that. And to speak directly to Bernie's observation, there are going to be occasions where customers may see employees not working hard, and we have made significant strides to try to increase output and production across the board. I'll speak directly to a program that we instituted just a couple years ago. We're going to report out on this very soon, that what we refer to as our efficiency and accountability program. We're going to realize about $90 million in efficiencies that we've realized over the last 2 years through this program. things like fuel efficiencies, production efficiencies. There's a number of programs within there that we've identified, staff has identified through those years. We've also even more recently looked at reducing spend. We've done $30 million just in the last, just in this current year of austerity measures, which included pay freezes for management, reductions of consultant and contractor costs. All these things we've tried to do, and we've tried to do it in such a way that the customer's not really noticing it. And what I mean by that is the service doesn't get reduced, safety's not compromised. One other thing I'll mention on this is revenues. You mentioned revenues,
Yep.
And so we've done a number of things to try to increase revenues. We have about $14 million in revenues from advertising. We have 5 of the 6 largest station naming contracts in the country. If you're familiar with NRG Station and Jefferson Station, right?
WHYY.
We were the leaders in that space. We were the first, but we generated that. We've reinstituted parking fees for our regional rail customers, and at our surface lots and garages, we've doubled those fees. We are looking for ways to help ourselves as much as possible. The fare increase I mentioned back in December was also netted us an increase in revenues, about $14 million. So we are helping ourselves by that and trying to address those things that Bernie is saying.
I guess what we haven't really talked about is the structural funding situation. So my understanding is that when you look at all of the subsidies that SEPTA gets, the vast majority comes from the state, right?
For sure.
More than 80%.
Yes.
The locals, let's say, Philadelphia and the collar counties, contribute less than 15% of that overall subsidy. How did we end up in that situation? Because when you look at it from that 30,000-foot view, it certainly seems like a state legislator could say, wait a second, why aren't the counties doing more here? Why is the state carrying such a heavy load in terms of subsidizing SEPTA?
Sure. So if I could just kind of take you on the Wayback Machine for a second.
Let's do it.
SEPTA was created by the General Assembly back in the early 60s. We were created to address a need in the region due to bankrupt, privately owned transportation companies.
Yep.
So they create SEPTA to be this municipal transportation authority.
And let's hit that hard there, because we're going to talk about privatization at some point.
As a potential
the private
solution.
companies could not turn a profit running this basic system, is what you're saying.
They could not. And Philadelphia and the surrounding counties were a collection of private transportation providers. Over time, they all went bankrupt. The General Assembly saw it that we need transportation in this region. They created SEPTA.
Yep.
SEPTA then went on to absorb the suburban transportation providers and eventually the remnants of the Reading and Pennsylvania railroads. So we have absorbed over those years all those private providers. So then the question about the contribution of the local counties, that's all set up in the formula that the General Assembly put forward as to who provides what funding to SEPTA.
You're saying they created this system.
Yes, this is a creation of the General Assembly. We would refer to as our enabling legislation.
Right.
And then the counties are contributing exactly what they're required to contribute. In fact, this current fiscal year, all 5 counties contributed more than they were required to commit, because they committed their funding based on what the governor proposed in his 2025 budget, not what they were required to provide.
Why not rejigger all of that, though, at this
Yeah.
point? I mean, the state, you keep going back to the state. It has been controlled legislatively by Republicans, some of whom are hostile to SEPTA or indifferent to it. Why not go to them and say, guys, let's take this off your plate. Let's come up with a new system where we're not coming to you all the time. We're going to Philly, we're going to Monco, we're going to Bucks, we're going to Chester, and we're leaning on them heavier because they're the primary beneficiaries of this system.
So there are movements afoot within the counties. They are looking for tools to help fund SEPTA. They have very very limited tools to acquire revenue that they could then in turn commit to public transportation. But those conversations are happening. That's things that the legislature can do. It's just something that's probably not something would happen quickly. but something could happen over time.
So what are the potential solutions? Because one possible solution would be to get the counties to pay more money. There have been other things floated around, like skill game taxes, or using some sales tax. Or there was one op-ed in the Philadelphia Magazine, that said, hey, maybe we could put a toll on the Schuylkill.
Some congestion pricing type thing. Yeah.
What is something people could get behind? Because I see people always protesting to save SEPTA, but they don't have a solution that they could call their legislator about.
Yeah, so I'll say that SEPTA is agnostic to the path. We don't advise the legislature on what path they should take. They, in turn, are proposing to each other, essentially, what their solutions are, some of which you name: skill games, tolling, cannabis. There's all sorts of ideas out there. We are agnostic to the solution necessarily. We know what the need is. We know what SEPTA and public transportation does for the Commonwealth. We essentially hand them what it will take to create a viable public transportation system in the Commonwealth. They have to then work out the solutions.
So you guys are not lobbying for yourself. I mean, are you lobbying for yourself?
We are lobbying for a viable, healthy public transportation system that is part of the larger transportation network in the Commonwealth. So transportation is roads, it's bridges, it's public transit. Not everybody has a car. Not everybody wants a car. In this part of the Commonwealth, the density and the development that happens here, the reason we can generate the revenue that we can in this part of the Commonwealth is because we are a densely populated area. We have thousands of jobs here, and we have a viable transportation network that includes a healthy transit system that can support all that. That is what we're lobbying for, the continuation of that transportation system.
Lots of comments coming in. Let's bring in another caller. This is Lisa from Bryn Mawr. I hope I got your name right there, on line 2, who has a comment for us. You're on Studio 2.
Hi. Thanks so much for hosting this conversation.
Sure.
I think it's really important for our area, our city, and our region. My comment is that with the cuts that SEPTA has had to make to service, especially to the collar counties, all of those cuts drive ridership away. So, and it increases traffic and congestion going down to the city from where we live. I encourage my kids take SEPTA whenever they can to go downtown to an event. We try to take SEPTA often when we're going downtown, either during the weekday or the weekend, and there's one train per hour. It's not convenient. It's not conducive to getting ridership back up. So I think the fact that you're agnostic about how you're going to fund SEPTA and make it part of a vital transportation system, it's really the keystone in our region. It should be the keystone in our region. I think SEPTA, you guys need to push back stronger on why this is so important, because you're just making day-to-day life for drivers and people who live and work in Philadelphia worse by cutting service.
Thank you.
That's
Elisa from Bryn Mawr.
Yeah.
Some response to that, Scott? I mean, this is about political tactics and rhetoric.
We are not back to full service.
Yep.
You know, you rattled off the ridership statistics. We're doing those numbers. You rattled off the ridership statistics. We're doing those numbers even though we're not running full service that we were running prior to the pandemic. It's not because we don't want to. We want to run full service. We want to run everything back that we could. Now, we've had some operator shortages and things like that we've had to overcome before we could ramp service back up. But all these cuts that we're proposing, that's not something that SEPTA wants to do. We are proposing this because it's what we have to do given the current financial situation we're in.
However, real quick, Scott, could you maybe take us, so for an outsider, they might think, why don't you maybe browbeat the legislature a little bit more? Just be stronger with them. You are in those rooms with, the leaders of the Republican-controlled Senate. what are those conversations like? And, realistically, what is the tone you feel like you can take here? And what do you think might drive people away? Because that's ultimately what this conversation is about, right?
Yeah, I mean, browbeat certainly is not the the approach. That's not the approach that I take, because my conversations that I've had with legislators has been largely productive. Both sides. We have our strongest advocates, of course, in the Southeast that are strong supporters on both sides of the aisle, and then we have our let's be honest, we have folks in the middle part of the state, western part of the state, that don't understand SEPTA. They may not fully appreciate the value that we add. That's my mission, is to go and educate folks, give them the straight story on who SEPTA is and the value we provide and how we provide it. The efficiencies I talked about, the cost savings, the revenue generation, that's the conversation I have. And I will say it's been largely very well received by everyone on both sides.
Yeah. Well, we have a lot of callers on the line. We have a number of people watching on YouTube and people sending in comments. And we're about to take a break.
Evasion.
We're going to have to bring that up. We're going to hold on the line. Don't hang up. We're going to take a break and we'll be right back. People are calling in. They're zipped in. They're locked in right now.
I guarantee you, folks, we will ask about fair evasion. We will get your questions in about that and a lot more coming up with Scott Sauer, SEPTA Interim General Manager. Keep the calls coming, 888-477-9499. The email is studio2@whyy.org. We'll be right back.
The Grand and Wilmington.
Welcome back to Studio 2. I'm Cherry Gregg.
And I'm Afi Wolfman-Arent. If you are just joining us, we're talking about the funding crisis that SEPTA is facing. Proposed cost-saving budget cuts for the transit agency include fare increases, curfews, and the elimination of several rail and bus lines. These potential cuts do come with short and long-term economic impact.
Yeah, and that's why SEPTA's interim general manager, Scott Sauer, has been in our studio taking questions this hour. And what do you want to know about SEPTA? Do you have some proposed solutions for this funding crisis? You can give us a call, 888-477-9499. You can email studio2@whyy.org. And all those folks on our YouTube page, be sure to keep those comments and questions coming in the chat. A lot of our folks on YouTube have been talking about enforcing current fares. And we also have a caller on the line, Josh from Philadelphia, who has a similar question or comment. Josh, you're on Studio 2. What's your question or comment?
Yes, thank you. So I ride the Broad Street line frequently, and I take the Ellsworth Federal stop a lot, and also Tasker Morris and Cecil B. Moore. And particularly at Cecil B. Moore, it's as though a fare is optional. I mean, lots of students just squeeze their way through the turnstiles, and I wouldn't want to criminalize poverty as a response to this problem, but the the folks who seem to be doing that, judging by book by its cover, I don't think they're all poor. I think it's just become kind of a laughing thing. They do it with a smile on their face. And I wonder if there can be some sort of public shaming, because I see that you've added stickers that talk about a $300 fine. I'm not sure those stickers are being read, but if you can indicate that fare evasion is not nice, it's not a good thing for the community, some sort of other campaign that might work, because I understand that the Inquirer said that's accounted for like an 18% budget shortfall. And it appears that other than those stickers, nothing else has been done.
Yeah, Josh, thanks so much for that question.
Yeah, and by the way, Ballet Boy on YouTube says, what do we do about the free riders? It may be a drop in the bucket as far as revenue, but if people aren't paying fares, the system crumbles. And Jaquan is on there, who says that he hops the turnstile every time he gets on the subway, but is complaining about the Market Frankfurt line, saying it's filthy. So your response to fare evasion?
Sure, I'll talk. So fare evasion is our top priority now in combating safety and security issues. Our transit police department had just as recently as 2 years ago, been woefully understaffed. We've been able to buck the trend amongst law enforcement agencies and add over 100 officers just in the last year or so. We have the largest police officer headcount that we've had in about a decade. And because of that, we've been able to make serious inroads in crime prevention. We reported our largest drop last year in crime on the system, and we have really pivoted strongly towards fare evasion. Just last year, the police department added back into their tool chest summary citations for fare evasion. The $300 fine that the caller mentioned is a result of that, and they've written hundreds of citations this year alone. And just recently, just last week, we announced a full-on blitz of fare evasion prevention, where we are throwing large amounts of security and staffing at different stations, unpredictable, unexpected. We're just popping up and blitzing these stations and going to do our best to get to zero fare evasion, and then measure and see what we can do to continue that trend. But we also know that the fare evaders, and this was mentioned by the caller as well, they are by and large not poor people who can't afford the fare, and they're not always necessarily bad people who are going to do worse things. These are folks who come to the station with cash in their pocket. Sometimes they have a fare card that they've either received from their employer or a student fare card. They have the means to pay, and they choose not to. And so we're taking a stand now. And we also know that fare evasion in some cases does lead to worse things. Mm-hmm. And so the police department has a laser focus now on fare evasion.
Yeah. Slow Food says that they would be willing to pay $3 to hop a bus halfway across the city. Still cheaper than a ride share. And let me bring in another caller who I think is going to maybe brighten your mood a little bit, Scott, because I know we've asked you some challenging questions. This is Evan from Philadelphia on line 2. Hey, Evan, you're on Studio 2. What's your question or comment?
Hello. I've been listening for a little bit, and I feel like there's a lot of SEPTA hate going on, and I just wanted to give a shout-out. I love SEPTA. I love public transport. I think we should all take public transport everywhere. And that's kind of it.
All right, Evan.
Thank you, Evan.
Give you a little pat on the back there, Scott.
All right, let's bring in another caller. Well done, Evan. At least you gave Scott a smile for the first time this hour. Line 4, Mark from Philadelphia. Mark, you're on Studio 2. I think you have a question for Scott. What is your question?
Well, I just have to follow up with Evan and tell Scott that I love the system. I have my little red pen on. I mean, I'm all for it. I think it's great. I've been riding it for 60 years, and I've seen it from PTC all the way through. And it's easy to pick on him about fare evasion and about the trains being dirty. But I was at Spring Garden the other day, and there were 2 custodial workers there cleaning, wiping down the lights, and I told them that I appreciated their jobs. So it's out there, and they're trying. So, Scott, I want to know, how would you gauge success? So fare evasion is at the top, but if you could fix 3 things, not budget, what would you do?
Interesting question. Thanks,
nice.
Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
Scott, that's
Sure.
to you.
No, I appreciate that question. So I think about this quite a lot, and I often get asked the question, "What keeps me up at night?" And the truth of the matter is everything.
It's longer than 3. I can tell you that.
3. But I think if I had to put my finger on what does success look like for SEPTA in my tenure is I want a system that number one is inviting. It's inviting to customers. Where SEPTA is a choice, and you heard from a couple callers who choose SEPTA. They choose to ride SEPTA. I hear often that people ride SEPTA because they have to. I want to get away from that. I want to be a mode of transportation that people choose to ride. Well, not just to get to work, but to get to a show or get to a ball game.
Yep.
And the only way you're going to do that is you got to make it safe and secure. Number one, you got to make it frequent. People have to be able to walk up to a station, walk up to a bus stop, and look down the street and see it coming, and know that I'm going to get on that bus just a few minutes, and I'm going to get where I need to go. So you have to make it safe. You got to make it reliable, and you got to take care of the customer. I often tell stories of what I believe to be some of my favorite private companies that do customer service really well, and one of those things was one of those stories was Walt Disney. And Walt Disney challenged his engineering team to go out and spend time with the customers, not let them know who you are, but stand there and listen to them. Try to address what's troubling them. Our customers are telling us what's troubling them.
Yeah.
My staff and my team have to go out and address those things. So those are the things that I gauge for success.
On the topic, though, of regularity of service, frequency of service, I look at some of these numbers and I say, this is some harsh reality staring SEPTA in the face. Pre-pandemic ridership still only about 3/4. Our ridership right now only about 3/4 of what we were pre-pandemic. Maybe in order to get regularity on certain lines, you've got to close down others instead of simply asking for the funding to maintain everything as it is. How do you respond to that? Is it time to strategically reduce parts of the system to make the other parts work really, really well?
Yeah, my statement to that is we've done that, and we've done it, but we haven't executed it yet. And what I mean by that is we underwent a multi-year process, what we termed bus revolution. Bus revolution was the redesign of the entire bus network to be modernized. We using the way people travel today, how they travel, redirecting our bus resources in places that make the system more frequent, more reliable, easier to make connections, easier to travel to destinations that the customer wants to get to. We introduced a concept called microtransit out in the suburbs, where we would replace the traditional 40-foot bus with a smaller vehicle that was more of an on-demand style service that you might know from rideshare, but in a public transit way. So we have taken these steps. Now, we can't execute this plan yet. It's on the shelf. It's ready to go until we resolve the funding crisis. On the rail side, we've done very similar exercises. We started a plan what we call reimagining regional rail, where we take the commuter rail concept and make it more of a metro-style service, like you would encounter in a subway. Whereas today, our regional rail riders are very dependent on the schedule.
Right.
And that one caller mentioned that it's not conducive, especially
one
on the
every
weekends,
hour.
one every hour. We want to do better than that. We want a train to come through every 15 minutes so that the customer no longer has to rely on that schedule. They know I show up at the
Could
station,
you
the train
close
comes.
one line maybe that's got low use, or maybe it's part of the Amtrak system and therefore you get a lot of savings out of it, and say, now we're going to do 15-minute on this other line that we know people really need?
What we can do, and yes, there's always an option to close lines, but again, it comes down to like our lowest ridership line on regional rail is our Kinwood line, one of the 5 that we targeted because of its Amtrak connection. We only run two or 4 trains a day over there, and
So
it's
the
just enough.
savings are not going to be.
There's no savings
Got
there,
it.
So we've scaled back on those routes that we need to.
I want to bring in another caller. I want to bring in Matt from Point Breeze, who has a question. Matt, you're on Studio 2. What's your question or comment?
Yes, I'm aware from Commonwealth representatives like Representative Waxman and Senator Saval that a number of bills have been passed by the Democratic House to fund SEPTA, but that they're being held up in the Transportation Committee in the state Senate. Who should we be calling as voters and constituents, since SEPTA does have, I think I saw an economic study that you put out, like more than a $3.2 billion economic impact on the entire state of Pennsylvania. Who should we be calling to exert our influence as riders and voters and constituents of these lawmakers?
Yeah, thank you. That's Matt from Point Breeze. People want to help you out.
Sure.
What can they do?
Oh, and we definitely want the help. And so what I would implore voters and constituents to call their local representatives, call the leadership, but don't limit your voice to just one side. The other side, whether they support SEPTA or they don't support SEPTA, they need to hear from people who are really experiencing this hardship of what could be. So if they're a friend of your position, then you certainly want to give them the stories that they need to have so they can convince their colleagues in the General Assembly how to shift and become more assertive. I think that the other thing that I would encourage everyone to do is we have hearings on this coming up, May 19th and 20th. I encourage everyone who has a voice and wants to express themselves, come to that hearing and be heard.
Beans 47 wants more public shaming for people that smoke on the train. Okay, public shaming. I guess that's going to be a group effort, I suppose. But I do want to make sure we ask about this because some Republicans in Harrisburg have floated the possibility of privatizing some bus lines. Deborah wants you to address that possibility. The move to privatize some bus service, I believe it's happened in Denver, or has happened for many years in Denver. Could that be a solution here? What might that look like?
So we privatize today. We use private contractors to deliver our paratransit and shared ride services. We have a number of contractors, very good partners of ours, by the way. And there are some advantages and disadvantages of using contractors to perform work like that. Now, the difference, of course, with paratransit and shared ride is it's scheduled service. Sure. Running fixed route service all day, every day, in some cases 24 hours a day, is a heavy lift for a private contractor. And while they may have done it to some limited extent in other cities, there are certain routes that would not be appealing to a private contractor.
Not profitable, you're saying.
They can't make money.
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is, and I was asked this question when we did we're planning for the Eagles Super Bowl parade. Someone had asked me, with all this extra service we're running, does SEPTA break even? No, we don't. We never break even.
Yeah.
All of our services are subsidized. They cannot survive by the fare box. And if you privatize it to the point where somebody has to make a profit, they would have to charge 3 to 4 times more than we do just to break even.
That'd be an expensive bus ride. By the way, Matt from Norristown says, please beg, borrow, and steal to keep SEPTA moving. And we can't go to Zane on the phone, but Zane wanted to ask about federal funding. Yep. Is there a way to get the feds involved here, maybe help make that a permanent solution, or at least a stopgap solution?
So the federal funding that we receive to the greatest extent funds our capital program. It does not really.
And capital meaning
building things, fixing things, buying
infrastructure.
things.
Yeah.
Yep. So the operating dollars, we don't really get many operating dollars from the federal government. We got one-time COVID relief dollars, which everybody in the industry got. We made those last longer than almost any of our peers. We just exhausted.
But you just don't foresee that being.
That's not really an option at this point. But certainly nothing's off the table.
And it's so funny. Scott Sauer, when he came in, he said, "This has been the busiest job." He's ever had of all the jobs at SEPTA.
He's had them all. Scott Sauer, SEPTA's interim general manager. Thanks so much for spending some time with us and our listeners today on Studio 2.
Thank you very much.
Yes, and thank you to everybody who called in today, everybody who took the time to email and to watch us on YouTube. We appreciate you. And we also appreciate our producers, Debbie Builder, Paige Murray Bessler, and Andreas Copes. Thanks to Mike Schiffler, our visual producer. Shout out to Al Banks, Tina Calica, and Adam Stanishevsky, who engineered today's show. Our executive producer is Kevin McCory from Studio 2 here at WHYY in Philadelphia. I'm Cherry Gregg.
I'm Avi Wolfman, Aaron. Apparently, people were asking why didn't I wear my SEPTA sweatshirt today? I'm unbiased. I'm neutral here. I'm not going to wear the SEPTA sweatshirt today, but I will talk with you tomorrow. Thanks so much for joining us.
Tomorrow on Studio 2, our topic is the housing affordability problem in the Philadelphia region. Experts say we need a lot more housing to meet demand and bring down those prices, but where do we build? Many communities don't want developments in their neighborhood. They say Not in my backyard.
Man, this is like an urbanist dream.
I know.
SEPTA into housing. So last week we hashed all of this out with a panel of experts who joined us for our latest Studio 2 on the road event in Delaware County. And tomorrow we will listen back to that conversation. Coming up next on WHYY, it's Here and Now.
Supporting WHYY, Rachel Riley, a real estate agent with